Good afternoon, children. Today we are going to see about the adventure of Blue Carbuncle. The following extract is adapted from a Sherlock Holmes mystery by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. The detective's famous approach that sees logic and deduction come into play when he tries to solve the crime. This particular story is written by Arthur Conan Doyle. I called on my friend Sherlock Holmes on the second morning after Christmas. It was the eve of Christmas and people were busy in celebrating, engaged in their festive mood. He was sitting on the sofa in a brown dressing gown, holding a pipe with pile of complete morning papers at hand. Beside the couch was a wooden chair. On the back of the chair hung a dirty, worn, hard felt hat. Felt means it was made out of skin and it was shabby. It was in a very ruined state. A lens and forceps lay upon the seat of the chair. Obviously, Holmes had hung the hat over the chair in order to examine it. Perhaps I interrupt you, I said. Not at all. I am glad to have a friend with whom I can discuss my results, said Sherlock. The matter is an ordinary one, he continued, but there are some points of interest in it. I seated myself in his armchair and warmed my hands before his crackling fire. There was a fireplace and they were sitting very close to it, and he was trying to warm up himself because it was winter season. It was the eve of Christmas. Although it looks very ordinary, a deadly story or crime must be linked to it. I guessed. No, crime, laughed Sherlock Holmes. Let me tell you how the hat came here. It was 4 o'clock on Christmas morning, and Peterson, the commissioner, a uniformed doer attendant, is known as commissioner, was walking home. A tallish man carrying a fat goose was walking ahead of him on the road. As he reached the end of the street, a little knot, here it refers to a group of people standing close to one another, of rough men, attacked the man who was having the goose. One of the hoodlums, your gangster or hired thugs, is known as your hoodlums, knocked off the tall man. He pushed man's hat as he aimed a blow at him. The tall man raised his stick to defend himself and swinging it over his head, smashed to hit hard the shop window behind him. Peterson rushed forward to protect the victim, but the man, frightened by Peterson's uniform, took to his heels. This is an idiomatic expression which means to run as fast as he could. For example, the thieves took to their heels when they saw the policeman. The roughs also ran away as Peterson approached. So Peterson was left with the fat goose and the battered hat that the tall man left behind. Battered means totally in a ruined or torn condition, dilapidated state, you can say. Peterson wanted to give the goose back to the owner, but faced quite a problem. Mrs. Henry Baker was printed on a small card that was tied to the goose's left leg. Also, the hat does have the initial HB that have been inscribed on its lining. However, there are thousands of bakers in this city, and many hundreds of those are Henry Bakers. Peterson brought both hat and goose round to me on Christmas morning, as he knows such problems interest me. Smashed means violent, stalking. Took to his heels means to run away. Battered means damaged or bruised. The goose we kept until this morning, when it seemed to be going bad. Peterson will have it cooked today. I thought that I would keep the hat with me. Did you advertise in the paper so that the owner can claim the hat? No. Then how will you know who the owner is? We know what we can deduce from. Deduce from means to deduct from or to make out from the hat that who is the owner of the hat. But you are joking. I don't see what you can deduce from this battered hat, damaged one. Here is my lens. You know my methods. What can you gather about man who owns this hat? I took the tattered object in my hands. Tattered means torn, completely damaged, and turned it over rather ruefully, very rudely. It was a very ordinary black hat of the usual round shape, hard and much the worse for wear. The lining had been red, but was a good deal discolored. There was no maker's name, but as Holmes had remarked, the initial HB were scrawled upon one side. It was printed on one side. It was pierced in the brim for a hat securer, but the elastic was missing. For the rest, it was cracked, exceedingly dusty, and spotted in several places, although there seemed to have been some attempt to hide the discolored patches by smearing them with ink, by just covering them with ink. I can see nothing. Tell me what you have deduced from this hat. Holmes looked thoughtfully at the hat and said, "The man leads a sedentary life and is quite clever. He is middle-aged and is not in good physical condition. His hair is grey and he puts lime cream in it." These were the deduction made by Holmes. He was rich, but is no longer so. Holmes had a few other such details about the man. I was astounded. I was taken aback. I was surprised. I must be very stupid, Holmes, for I am quite unable to follow you. For example, how did you deduce that he is clever from his hat? Well, the hat is very large, so he must have some brains. This was the reply. How do you know he has grey hair and use lime cream? There is some fine grey hair on the lining of the hat, border of the hat. Therefore, his hair must be grey. There is a fine whiff. Whiff means smell of lime from the hat, and so he must use lime cream. Holmes had a logical explanation for each of his deduction. He gave a very reasonable cause or reason for his deduction, what he made out of the hat. While Sherlock Holmes and I were talking, Peterson rushed into the room. He showed us a beautiful blue diamond that his wife had found in the goose. Sherlock Holmes immediately recognized it as a beautiful gem that had recently been in the news. Holmes recalled reading about the theft. It had been stolen from Countess of Morcar while she was staying at the Hotel Cosmopolitan. A plumber who had come in to set something right in the room had been accused of theft. Ryder, an attendant at the hotel, had given evidence that he had shown the plumber in shortly before the stone went missing. The Countess was very fond of the gem and was offering £1,000 as a reward for its recovery. You see, Watson, our little deduction has suddenly assumed a much more important and less innocent aspect, said Holmes thoughtfully. The question for us to solve now is a sequence of events leading from a rifled jewel case. Rifled means stolen jewel case at one end to the crop here means appearance of a goose in Tottenham Court Road at the other. The first step Holmes took was to place the following advertisement in the papers. Found at the corner of the Good Street, a goose in a black felt hat. Mr. Henry Baker can have the same by applying at 6:30 this evening at 2218 Baker Street. This brought Baker home to Holmes, and after a little conversation, what happens we will see next. It became quite clear to us that he was innocent. So Holmes gave him a fine goose to replace the one he lost and sent him off very happy and contented. Contented means satisfied. Sent himself to depart. The next step was to trace the seller of the goose. Some questioning of Mr. Baker led us to the seller, Mr. Breckenridge. A little conversation with him, and we found Mr. Baker's goose for Christmas had come from a lady called Mrs. Oakshott from Brixton Road. As Holmes and I, that is, friend of Holmes, were planning to contact Mrs. Oakshott, we heard a hubbub. Hubbub means noise or confusion near Mr. Breckenridge. The goose seller was shaking his fist at a little red-faced man who was whining. Whining means complaining that the goose was his. "Ha! This may save us a visit to Brixton Road," whispered Holmes, and went after the man. The man, it turned out, was Ryder, the hotel attendant. He was Mrs. Oakshott's brother. She bred geese for the table, means reared goose for the meal, for her living, and had promised Ryder a fine goose for Christmas. Ryder, who had given evidence against the plumber, was the one who had stolen the gem. He went to see his sister with the gem in his pocket. He put it into the mouth of the goose. He thought that his sister had reserved for him to avoid being caught red-handed. Caught red-handed means on the spot. However, he got the wrong goose, and the goose that had the gem got sold to Mr. Baker through Mr. Breckenridge. In despair, Ryder tried to recover the goose from Mr. Baker by having him waylaid. Waylaid means misled by hoodlums, the gangster, thugs. But as it happened, neither did Ryder get the goose, nor did he recover the gem, because Mr. Peterson came by and frightened the roughs away and brought the goose to Holmes. Here we see that the goose was not received by Ryder. Rather, he was told to leave that place, and it was handed over to the real owner. So this is how we see that Sherlock Holmes was able to solve the mystery of the blue carbuncles. In the next PDF file, I will give you in written or printed matter the question answer of lesson 1. That's all for today. Thank you.